My name is Lucy Harper, and I'm 34 years old. Before I start, thank you for being here and listening. I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop your city or country in the comments so I can see how far this story reaches. If you've ever dealt with a boss who enjoyed humiliating people, don't forget to like and subscribe. It was a Monday morning team meeting. We sat around the long table with coffee cups, laptops, and polite smiles. My boss, Brad Collins, stood at the front like he owned oxygen itself. He glanced at my notes, then at me, and laughed. "Lucy," he said loud enough for everyone to hear, "you're proof you can climb out of anywhere if you work hard enough." A few people chuckled nervously. Then he added, smiling like it was a compliment, "But some backgrounds, you can still hear them in the way someone carries themselves." My stomach dropped. My cheeks burned. I felt every eye in the room dart to me, then quickly away. Brad leaned back and said, "Anyway, this is a good time for a reminder. Polish matters. Perception matters." I tried to breathe through it. I told myself not to react. Then Brad looked toward the conference room door and said brightly, "Perfect timing. Let's do the introductions." The door opened, and it wasn't HR walking in. A woman entered with two senior leaders behind her. Not casual, not friendly, purposeful. Brad's smile widened like he expected applause. The woman set a folder down and said, "Good morning. I'm Dana Mercer. I'm here to evaluate operations and leadership alignment." The air changed instantly. Brad's smile twitched slightly like his face realized something before his brain did. Dana scanned the room once, then looked straight at me. "Lucy Harper," she said. My chest tightened. "Yes?" Dana nodded. "I need your dashboard, the one tracking delivery failures and client complaints." Brad turned sharply, like he'd been slapped. Because that dashboard wasn't public knowledge. He laughed too loudly and said, "Her dashboard? She's support staff. I'll handle that." Dana didn't look at him. She just said, "No, she will." The silence that followed felt like ice cracking under weight. Brad's jaw tightened, his hands gripped the back of a chair. I pulled out my laptop slowly. My fingers trembled slightly as I opened the file. Dana moved closer to review it, ignoring Brad completely. Brad stood frozen, his confident posture crumbling with every second Dana spent looking at my work instead of his. 6 months earlier, when I first joined the company, I thought I'd finally made it somewhere stable. Brad welcomed me in private with big smiles and promises. In public, he kept me small. The first time I suggested a fix, something simple that would have prevented mistakes, he smirked and said, "That's cute, but we do things differently here." Later that week, I heard him pitching my exact idea in a leadership huddle. He never looked at me once while he took credit. That night, I found my name removed from the project file. Just gone, like I'd never contributed anything. I told myself it was a misunderstanding. Maybe he forgot, maybe someone else made the change. But it kept happening. I did work. Brad collected applause. If I corrected an error, I was picky. If I raised a risk, I was negative. If I asked a question in meetings, Brad joked that I still had that small-town suspicion of authority. My coworker Maya leaned close one day and whispered, "He picks one person to step on. It keeps everyone else scared." I realized then that I wasn't paranoid. I was the target. The pattern became clearer every week. Brad gave me tasks, then changed the requirements without telling me. When I delivered what he originally asked for, he acted disappointed in front of others. He scheduled meetings during my lunch breaks, then complained I looked tired. He asked for my input privately, then dismissed it publicly. One afternoon, he forwarded an email chain to the entire team. It was a mistake I supposedly made. Except I hadn't made it. The error came from someone else's work entirely. I sent a polite correction with documentation. Brad replied only to me, "Don't make excuses." That same week, I got a calendar invite. Performance check-in. Brad Collins. My stomach twisted. I knew what was coming. The next day, I sat in his office while he wore his calm voice like armor. "You're valuable," he said. "But leadership? That's about polish. You don't carry it." He smiled faintly, like he was being generous. "I'm telling you this because I care. Perception is fragile, Lucy. You don't want people getting the wrong idea." It felt like a threat dressed up as mentoring. That night, while clearing emails, I saw something that made my hands go cold. An executive thread forwarded by mistake. Brad had blamed me for a failure I hadn't caused. He wrote, "Lucy's inexperience shows. We need stronger oversight." I stared at the screen, my pulse pounding in my ears. Before I could respond, I got an email from a name I didn't recognize. Dana Mercer. Subject line, meet privately, 8 tomorrow morning. I barely slept that night. The next morning, I arrived at the small conference room early. Dana was already there, looking composed and unreadable. She didn't ask where I went to school. She didn't ask where I grew up. She asked, "Why are your numbers improving while Brad's reports say they're stable?" Then she slid a sheet across to me. It was a list of performance improvements, all credited to Brad. Dana looked at me and said, "Don't explain. Show me how work actually moves through this team." She added quietly, "And Lucy, don't warn him I'm asking." I nodded, my throat tight. I realized then that someone was finally paying attention. I didn't confront Brad. I didn't cry at my desk. I didn't rant to coworkers. I started documenting everything the clean way. Meeting notes, follow-ups, action items, deadlines, approvals. Every time Brad gave direction verbally, I summarized it politely in writing. "Just confirming our discussion," I'd write, then CC the relevant people. Brad noticed fast. "You don't need to CC everyone," he snapped one day. I smiled and said, "Just making sure I have clarity." He stared at me for a long moment, then walked away. That evening, Brad reassigned one of my core tasks to someone else, someone less qualified. He didn't tell me directly. I found out when a coworker asked why I wasn't working on it anymore. I sent a polite email asking for clarification. Brad replied vaguely about shifting priorities. I forwarded his response to Dana without comment. Just facts. The next morning, Brad's mood was darker. He avoided eye contact with me but watched me constantly from across the office. I kept my head down and kept documenting. Brad suddenly became warm. Too warm. He praised me publicly. He invited me to lunch. He asked about my weekend like he'd remembered I was human. It wasn't kindness. It was surveillance. Then he started giving me impossible deadlines, hoping I'd fail loudly. Projects that normally took a week, he wanted in 2 days. Tasks that required 3 people, he assigned only to me. But I didn't fail. I delivered everything. Quietly, perfectly. I asked for help when I needed it and documented every request. When Brad delayed approvals, I noted the timestamps. One evening, he added me to a late-night executive call. My stomach dropped when I saw the invite. I knew it was a setup. On the call, Brad smiled and said, "Lucy, can you pull the vendor escalation report right now?" I froze for half a second, because I didn't have those permissions. Brad knew that. I didn't panic. I said calmly, "I can't access that report yet. I requested permission twice. I can resend that thread if needed." A silence dropped like a weight. One executive asked, "Why doesn't she have access?" Brad stumbled through an answer. After the call, Brad messaged me, "Stop making me look bad." The next day, Kevin, a coworker who always played neutral, pulled me aside. He said carefully, "Brad thinks you're challenging him. Maybe tone it down." It wasn't advice. It was a warning. I realized Kevin knew too much. He was hearing things before I did. He was Brad's informant. That afternoon, Brad announced a leadership track program. He praised 3 people for their potential. Then, he looked right past me. A few coworkers glanced at me with pity. Maya's jaw tightened like she wanted to speak up, but she didn't. Brad finished with a smile. "Let's keep building strong talent." Dana stood near the back of the room, arms folded, watching everything. After the meeting, Dana stopped me. "I need the real reason we're losing clients," she said quietly. I told her the truth. We weren't stable. We were bleeding quietly. Brad had been making decisions that looked good on paper, but broke operations in real life. He prioritized speed over accuracy. He promised clients things we couldn't deliver. Dana's face didn't change, but her eyes sharpened. "This is bigger than one manager," she said. That night, I got locked out of the shared drive I built. My access was gone. Brad claimed it was IT maintenance, but IT told me quietly, "We were told to remove you by Brad." I wrote it down. I forwarded the access history to Dana and HR. No emotion, just dates, facts, timestamps. HR replied quickly, "Let's meet tomorrow, in person, with Brad present." The next morning, I sat across from HR while Brad played wounded. "Lucy's paranoid," he said. "She makes everything a conflict." HR nodded sympathetically at him, then looked at me and said, "We value harmony. Sometimes communication style matters more than content." I didn't argue. I placed my documentation on the table. Every email, every request, every denial. HR's smile thinned as they flipped through the pages. They ended the meeting with, "We'll be monitoring your communication." I walked out knowing I was being watched, but so was Brad. That afternoon, Maya told me Brad was spreading rumors. "He's saying you're on thin ice," she whispered. That same hour, a calendar invite hit my inbox. Ops realignment, confidential. Executive attendance only. Brad wasn't on the invite. Dana texted me one sentence, "Don't tell anyone, be there." In the executive room, Dana asked me to explain how work actually flowed. I did. Calm. Simple. Human language. No jargon. A senior leader leaned back and said, "We've heard Brad's version." Dana replied, "And now you've heard the accurate one." Then she said, "We're creating a new role. Operations Integrity Lead." My heart stuttered. Dana added, "But Brad is already trying to fill it with someone else." I felt the weight of that statement. Brad was moving fast to control the narrative and the position. The executives exchanged glances. One of them asked, "What do you need from Lucy moving forward?" Dana smiled slightly. "Honesty, which is what she's been giving us all along." The meeting ended with instructions to keep everything confidential. I walked out feeling lighter but terrified. Brad found out I'd met with leadership. I don't know how, but his voice turned cold the next day. "You climbed out of nowhere and you think you get to speak to them?" he said quietly in the hallway. Then he joked about my upbringing again, crueler and sharper than before. I didn't respond emotionally. I sent a calm email summarizing the conversation. Brad panicked. That night, Brad sent a company-wide email implying I mishandled a major client escalation. My inbox exploded. Coworkers treated me differently. Some avoided eye contact. Some looked like they were waiting for me to quit. Brad approached with fake sympathy. "Don't worry," he said. "I'll help you recover from this." I pulled the call logs and email chain. The decision came from Brad, his approval, his signature. I forwarded everything to Dana without a single word of explanation. The client requested a meeting, with Dana present. In the meeting, Brad spoke first. Smooth. Confident. He blamed a junior misunderstanding. He didn't name me, but everyone knew what he meant. Dana looked at him and asked one question. "Who approved the final change?" Brad hesitated. The client's account manager leaned forward and said, "We recorded the approval call." Brad's face drained of color. The client played the call. Brad's voice filled the room, approving the exact change he'd denied making. The silence after was brutal. Then the client said, "We want Lucy as our contact moving forward." Brad stood too fast. His chair scraped loudly. He stormed out without another word. That afternoon, security escorted someone out of the building. Not Brad. Maya. Maya was accused of leaking internal documents. I felt sick. Maya was the only one who'd supported me openly. She texted me minutes later. "Brad set me up. He needed a scapegoat." Dana called me immediately. "Come now, we found something in the audit trail." My hands shook as I walked to her office. I realized Brad was willing to destroy anyone who stood in his way. Dana showed me access logs. Brad had used Kevin's credentials to move files. Then it was made to look like Maya leaked them. IT confirmed the badge records. Maya wasn't even in the building when the leak supposedly happened. Dana's voice went cold. HR either helped or looked away. She looked at me directly. "Tomorrow is the final meeting." I barely slept that night. I kept replaying everything. The humiliation, the gaslighting, the fear. But underneath it all, I felt something else. Clarity. Brad had overplayed his hand. He'd left a trail, and people were finally following it. Brad arrived at the final meeting confident, dressed like he expected a promotion. HR sat beside him like backup. Brad said, "Lucy's performance has been unstable. I think we need to discuss a performance improvement plan." Dana cut him off. "This isn't about Lucy. It's about accountability." She turned the screen around. A timeline appeared. Brad Collins, pattern of misattribution and retaliation. Brad blinked hard like his brain couldn't process what he was seeing. Dana said, "And there's one more thing you don't know yet." She stood and continued, "We're restructuring. We're creating a new Operations Integrity Lead role." Brad's eyes brightened until Dana said, "Congratulations to Sarah Klein." "Not me." Brad exhaled like he'd survived. Then Dana added, "And Sarah will report directly to Lucy Harper." The room snapped silent. Brad's face crumpled. He blurted desperately, "You can't do this, she's nobody." Dana stared at him. "That's exactly why you're done." HR slid a folder toward Brad. "Resignation option or termination." Brad's hands trembled as he opened it. Brad was offered a quiet exit. He could resign with a neutral reference, or be terminated with cause. He chose resignation. HR leadership was disciplined for mishandling complaints. Kevin was fired for credential sharing and acting as Brad's informant. Maya was reinstated with a formal apology and back pay. Brad tried to catch me on his last day. His voice was shaking. "Lucy, please, tell them I'm not a bad guy. I can't lose everything." I looked at him, calm and steady. "You didn't lose everything," I said. "You lost control." I walked back inside. No big speech, no victory lap. Just the quiet satisfaction of finally being treated like I belonged. 2 weeks later, I sat in my new office. It wasn't huge, but it was mine. The nameplate on the door read Lucy Harper, Director of Operations. Maya stopped by with coffee. "You did it," she said, smiling. I shook my head. "We did it. You stood up when no one else would." She squeezed my hand. "And you documented everything when I couldn't." For the first time in my life, my background wasn't something to apologize for. It was proof I could survive what people like Brad tried to do to me. And I was just getting started.